What's going on, team? Now, I used to believe, as I'm sure many of you have done, that training continuously, week in, week out, without ever taking a break was somehow a sign of strength and resilience. In fact, the more my body was actually screaming out for some kind of temporary rest or deload week, the more I used to congratulate myself for my mental fortitude, for just literally ignoring everything it was telling me to do. But now I'm wise at my grand old age of 33. Okay, maybe not very wise. I realize that this approach is in fact completely stupid, and that taking a proper deload week, usually once every 8 or 12 weeks or something like that, is not only absolutely necessary, it can also be incredibly beneficial to your performance, your health, and your physique. And how to read the signs of when we need to do it and what to do when we take a deload week is exactly what we're going to cover today. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Jim Galvin, and on this channel, we cover all things training, nutrition, biohacking, and ancestral living to cut through all the fluff of the fitness industry and help people just like you figure out what you need to do based on your individual biology to help improve your performance, your physique, and your health. And today, I want to share my 3 top tips for how to approach a deload week properly so it disrupts your training as little as possible. So let's get cracking, shall we? Okay, so it happens to all of us, right? We start to feel tired, we start to feel sore, we start to feel stiff, we just start to feel a little bit more lethargic than we should be all the time. Everybody that trains, guys, is gonna have a couple of different symptoms that their body is throwing their way to let them know that they now need a deload. For me personally, it's 2 different things. Number 1, I start to feel incredibly gassed incredibly quickly on any erg kit, rower, ski erg, assault bike, the first 10, 15 seconds, even of a warm up, and I'm starting to feel out of breath already. And the second thing, not necessarily the process of moving a barbell and things like clean or a squat, but if I've got something in a back rack position, so I unrack a back squat, it just feels incredibly heavy on my spine. That is the other symptom for me. And when that happens, I know it's time to take a break. But whatever those symptoms are for you, today's video, the purpose of today's video is to convince you as much as I can that we can deload without losing gains and without it disrupting our training routine too much. Most people think there are 3 different options when it comes to needing to take a break because we've been training too hard. They either need to rest completely, train a little bit lighter, or just keep pushing through, training your face off and hoping that you somehow have some random bit of genetic code that makes you exempt from every scientific principle we know about the human species. Hopefully you've sussed from my incredibly passive-aggressive statement there that it is in fact not number 3. Try as you might, you are not going to beat the system, especially when it comes to neural training. So whenever lifting heavy strength and speed work, that is the stuff that is challenging your central nervous system. When you're doing a lot of this, that is to say 2 to 3 sessions plus per week, you are 1,000,000% not going to beat the system. You will not only not progress, you are just going to dig yourself into a hole. It is, of course, the second one, train a little bit lighter. But what exactly does this mean, and how do we actually apply this principle to our training routine? Well, my 3 top tips are inbound, so get your notebooks out and prep yourself for some knowledge nuggets. But for those of you that are already still hooked on the statement from a couple of minutes back where I said that a deload week will not only be necessary, but can actually massively improve your performance, your health, and your physique, and are thinking, well, Jim, if that's really the case, please explain that to me, then luckily for you, that is exactly what I'm about to do now. Newsflash, training does not make you stronger, training makes you weaker. Training in the gym does not directly do anything for your body. What it does is it actually breaks down your body, breaks down some of the systems, and sometimes, if we're doing it right, it will break down certain muscle fibers. It is the rest and recovery between sessions where our body goes through all of these different adaptation processes where it doesn't rebuild the same number of muscle fibers, as an example. It actually overcompensates and rebuilds more. That is how our muscles grow. We break down 10 fibers, we rebuild 15, and lo and behold, after that process, we've got more. That is how we get stronger, that is how we get fitter, that is how we get bigger, and that is how we get better at pretty much any component of fitness, right? Just as any training session will need an adaptation time window for the body to do its thing after the session, an entire training cycle of anywhere between 8 and 12 weeks will also need a dedicated time window to go through some of the adaptation processes in a little bit more detail and a little bit more comprehensively. That is the purpose of a deload week. The people who train for 13 weeks straight, or the people who train for 12 and then have a week off, come the beginning of that 14th week, it is the people who took the deload week that are going to be better. No one is telling you to do this stuff because they're trying to convince you to do something you shouldn't do just out of spite. The reason that people do this, the reason that the top athletes in the world follow this kind of protocol and have deload weeks, is because it might just be beneficial. It's not because they're lazy, it's because it flipping works. But onto the first hack, let's get cracking with that now. When we look at a training session, there are 4 main variables when it comes to certain exercises that I want us to think about now. We have reps, the number of reps we do in a set. We have the number of total sets we do. We have the rest interval between sets, and we have the tempo, so the way in which we approach a particular repetition, the speed on the way down, the pause, the way up, and the pause at the top. Do we decrease all of these? Do we decrease one? Do we increase the other? What the hell do we do, Jim? I hear you cry. Drum roll, please. Unequivocally, the answer is decrease the number of sets. That is the bit that I want you to focus on now. As an example, if we are normally doing 5 sets of 5 on a certain resistance for a certain exercise, decrease that to 2 sets of 5, and that might just be good enough to give your body the deload and the rest that it needs. Hopefully, for those of you that are still struggling with the idea of taking a little bit of time away, this is good news because it once again proves that we can go through this protocol and execute the rest period in the right way without it disrupting your training routine too much. Obviously, you might want to play it by ear and decrease the total amount of weight, decrease the reps, etc., and a couple of other things as well. But first and foremost, the thing that I want you to remember is to decrease the number of sets. That's the first step. You can keep your program pretty much exactly the same, keep the skeleton of it, course correct, test and adjust, just tweak a couple of bits and bobs after you tweak the sets, and then go from there. But at least it gives you a good first bit of guidance as to how to do this stuff and how to rest up properly. Hack number dos, to give your musculature and your connective tissues, that is to say your tendons and your ligaments, enough of a break from breaking down and then being forced to rebuild, because this is how muscles grow, right? I would like you to reduce the amount of what's called eccentric load when you are lifting a barbell. Eccentric load, for those of you that don't know, is the downward portion of a particular lift. So with bench press, as an example, you unrack, say 50, 100, 150 kilos, whatever it may be. It is the controlled descent towards your chest, where your muscles that are working, your chest and your tricep, aren't actually shortening, they're lengthening, right? It is this process of that controlled descent. That is when you are breaking down the majority of your muscle fibers. So if we can approach our program pretty much as normal, but decrease the amount of eccentric load, that's a great way to just help give your body a little bit more time and opportunity to rest and recover. You can either do this with lighter resistance, so basically lift a little bit lighter weight overall, or actually double down on certain exercises that have no eccentric load at all. A great example of this is a sled push, right? A prowler, because you think you're concentrically pushing, you're digging your toe into the ground, extending your leg. This is working the lower body push levers, but then you are not lifting your leg up against anything other than air. You're literally just activating the hip flexor a tiny little bit, bringing the knee forward, and then digging the toe into the ground again. There is no eccentric load on a prowler push, which makes it an unbelievable asset if you are to include it in the lower body part of your deload week. It's also an unbelievable way to gain new muscle and work really, really hard if you're trying to push through a certain strength limit and plateau, but that is not what we're talking about now. Stay focused, please. And thirdly, my third and final magic hack slash normal scientific principle is this: in every crisis, there is opportunity. And for those of you that sadly still see a deload week as a crisis, but smartly enough realize that you still have to do it, the good news is there are opportunities. Use this time productively. And in using this time wisely, for me, there is no greater opportunity than working on my weaknesses, especially in a slightly more holistic, slow-paced way that we wouldn't really bother with when we're in the middle of a hefty training cycle. And for me, in terms of how I use this time wisely, there are 3 different things that I would like to share with you now. And firstly, unilateral work, unilateral, single side. Use this deload week to develop as much balance and symmetry in your body as you can with single arm work and single leg work. Any single side work around the shoulders or the hips, when executed slowly, is an amazing way to not put too much stress on your body, but it's still getting all the stabilizers firing, so we generate as much balance and symmetry as possible. Again, setting us up maximally ready for the next training cycle that we're going to start next week, full on hard, so we can get stuck in properly straight away. Secondly, work on your core, especially again in a slower paced, less glamorous way than we would normally do in the gym. Things like TA or transverse abdominis work, making sure your pelvis is in the right line, maybe some counter movement work that again is executed slowly. This is the stuff that we know we need to do, we know it's beneficial, but we always put it off at the end of every session because we're A, either absolutely knackered, or B, it's just not glamorous, it's flipping boring and I can't be bothered. Use this week as an opportunity opportunity to double down on that kind of stuff. And thirdly, mobility. Use the deload week as an opportunity to stretch, try to lengthen the muscles, increase the range of motion around different joints. Again, shoulders, hips, and ankles for me are always a focus on my deload week. And because you're going through these processes and doing these mobility drills during a week that you're putting less strain on your body, I actually start to feel a difference in my mobility levels already in that 7-day period. There we go, guys. Deload weeks done. They are absolutely necessary. Do not think you can beat the system, please. If we avoid them, we are just starving our body of the time and opportunity it needs to go through those adaptation processes to make us bigger, stronger, better, and fitter. But if we approach deloads properly and we execute it with the 3 hacks that I've just shared, decreasing sets, usually by 50% or more, decreasing the amount of eccentric load, especially on lower body and push movements, and stretching, unilateral work, and core work, you'll get all the benefits without having to disrupt your rhythm too much. Now, in terms of what your training looks like for you right now, there are few things in the world as contentious as what is the best training method. Am I right? I've spent the last 10 years trying as much as possible to try to get as much content and context on this particular issue. And one thing that's really had an effect on me, especially over the last 12 to 18 months, is strongman style training. We know it develops strength. Obviously, it's literally in the name. But does it develop conditioning as well, and even maybe physique? Well, lucky for you, you son of a gun. I did a video on this very recently. So if you did enjoy today's content, please do click this link right now to watch that video immediately. Been a pleasure chatting with you as always, guys. And flipping heck, do me a favor. Stay strong, stay healthy, stay awesome, and peace out for now. See you next time.